Today, Chris and I have asked our guest, Karinne, to join us and share her testimony, her story of a life completely transformed by the love of Jesus. Now, in part one, and I encourage you to watch it, you'll hear about the colorful lifestyle that Karinne had adopted and the ways that she had chosen to go that ended up with her having questions about who she was and where her life was headed and how it is that God could possibly turn things around in her world and in the world of her son. And so, Karinne, can you give us a recap of what we talked about in part one, the before video, and share with us a little bit about what your day-to-day life looked like at that time?
Yeah, so being a single mom, and even when I was no longer a single mom, it kind of looked the same. I still went out just as much when I was no longer single, but going out a lot, partying a lot, pretty much almost every day I was drinking. I tried to keep it under wraps because of my son, so oftentimes I would wait until he went to bed before I would take it to the next level. And it was very difficult because I wanted to give better to my son. However, I didn't have control over my drinking. I actually did go to AA for about 10 years, and I did whatever I could to try to quit drinking, but there was something in me that I just couldn't do it. And I was never the type of alcoholic that would wake up and drink vodka. I was a very normal, functioning person and mother. And people would look at me and they wouldn't think, oh, she's, an alcoholic. I look like a regular, young lady. However, what the problem was is I had no off switch. And without having the off switch and my alcoholic gene that I inherited, I just took it to the next level all the time. I never felt like I was drunk enough. I was always chasing something, and I was never satisfied. And I would drink and drink and drink, and I never felt drunk enough. And once I actually was drunk enough, then a lot of times I would want to get high. I would want cocaine. It would take it to the next level because I was like empty. I was still very empty inside. But I didn't know all the time how bad it was. I did feel like I belonged. So on the first part where I mentioned how being a foster and an adopted kid, I never had that sense of belonging. I wasn't a real child of my adopted parents, and I no longer fit in with my biological family because I was removed from there. So I felt very alone and just different from everybody. But when I was around, either at the bar or just in a setting where everybody's drinking, I felt like I belonged. I fit in, So it gave me that false sense of identity. I remember I used to think I was primarily Irish before Ancestry DNA. So I had that like, oh yeah, I'm a drinker because I'm Irish, or, it made me feel comfortable, and the only other time I had felt that, ironically enough, was in the walls of Alcoholics Anonymous, because once my drinking had progressed to a point where I recognized I actually needed help, and I would go to AA. Those people I understood, and they understood me, because people would tell me, just don't drink so much. You're fine. Just don't drink so much, or just quit drinking.
Right.
And they don't recognize that that's not possible. I couldn't just quit drinking because I wasn't ready, and I couldn't just not drink enough, or I couldn't not drink too much because I had no off button. So if you don't get it, you don't get it. If you don't have that problem, it's very hard to understand. So I did feel comfortable in AA, although I still felt empty at the same time, because I would sit there and I'd see people getting a good amount of sobriety, and I'm like, why can't I do this? So for a while I started believing I'm just not capable of ever being sober. This is who I am, and this is how I'm going to die, and that's it. And I started accepting that for a while. because my efforts felt in vain. And that drinking, I couldn't fully accept it either, because I would have so much anxiety and guilt, you know, being a mom. I would wake up after binge drinking after a few hours, and I would have auditory hallucinations. I would be shaking. I would be terrified, feeling like I'm dying. And it was just the most miserable feeling in the world, yet I would repeat it over and over and over, because I wasn't, I was still partially in denial. And I do want to say, there's, on the AA website, there's a section where it says, it's like an alcoholics quiz. If you answer yes to 3 or more of these questions, you may be in serious trouble. And so there's one that has 20 questions, and I could answer yes to 19 out of 20 of these questions. And I still would rationalize in my mind, these aren't dramatic. Like, who made up this quiz? Like, this is normal, you know? Yeah, who hasn't lost jobs because of their drinking? That's normal. Who hasn't been arrested? Or, you know? So there was that too, that lack of accepting the truth, you know? So it's just a big confusing cycle.
And so now you mentioned that you were living in an apartment on an alley.
In an alley, yeah.
And next to, there were 2 bars.
Oh yeah, there's 2 bars. One of them, my front door and the back smoking section is just right in front of each other. So if it was hot and I had my door open and my screen shut, they could see into my house. And when I'm trying to be good, somebody would look over from the bar, hey, bought you a pitcher. You know, so I'd be like, okay, you know. So it was really hard to quit drinking when I have this literally right in front of my face, like such easy access.
And so you're touching on some things that I think are really important for people to know. And that's that addiction and drinking is, for a lot of people, there are seeming benefits that they gain from being in that lifestyle. And one of the things that Karinne is mentioning is that somehow that gave her a sense that she belonged. And we all, as people, have a desire to connect. We are all looking to love and be loved. And so sometimes as things progress, it can become very isolating. And what Karinne is describing in terms of the aftermath of the drinking and how she felt is a part of what happens as darkness starts to take over. And so now, when was it that things started to change for you?
Well, obviously when I met you, because I didn't have anyone really holding me accountable before. I had a lot of family members and friends who would cry to me because they're concerned and we needed intervention, but nobody was really doing anything. So I met Regina in 2009,
yes,
I believe. And I remember just the way she made me feel, like she wasn't judging me, because I didn't feel comfortable around Christians in general. I felt, I felt like they're judgmental. If they were to really know me, they would be judging me. I didn't feel like I had my life together enough to really do anything with it, to be really involved in church, because I was so involved in my own demise and my own sin. Forgetting about how Jesus says, come as you are. I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. And then when I met you, I felt like, oh, who's this woman, this godly woman who's not shaming me or telling me I have to quit drinking. You know, you never pressured me to do anything. You were just loving and extremely patient. And so, yeah, you started working with me around that time. And bless Regina's heart, because it was a long road of counseling and whatnot. And I had a lot of deep-rooted issues and pains and hurts and traumas that were kind of stuffed down, that I wasn't realizing was why I chose to drown myself in alcohol and kind of detached from reality. And so over the course of meeting with you, first started off with on the phone, and then we had girls group,
Right,
where Regina taught us some techniques to really pay attention to our emotions and our thoughts, and validate them, and so that they don't bubble over and become so overwhelmed that we explode and just go back out to our own
unhealthy
habits. Yeah. So, but I hadn't quit drinking still throughout that, but it was helpful. It just wasn't really quite.
Right. And again, it's important for people to remember, if God has called you to mentor or to be a spiritual parent, it's really important to keep in mind the whole person. It's very easy to get distracted and caught up in an issue as glaring as drinking or drug use. And and the important thing to remember, and I do remember Karinne's sister expressing a concern to me about Karinne's drinking. And she asked me, why didn't I sponsor her or call her to task and make that a focus in my time with her? And I told her sister, Krista, I said, my relationship with her is more important. It goes beyond whether or not she drinks again. And so God had called me to love her through the messy parts of her life. And I'm so thankful that he did, because again, as we continue, the story gets much better. And so Krista introduces us. We're talking on the phone in 2009. 2010, I start girls group here at the house. And at that time, were you doing well as girls group progressed?
No, I still wasn't doing well. I would say that I was paying more attention to my actions, but I wasn't doing well. I felt very convicted every single Saturday as I'm on my way over here. Of course, always trying to hide from Regina how hungover I was. I'd have to go use her restroom to vomit as quietly as possible, and I thought that she didn't know, but she knew. But no, I still was not doing well. I was just more aware of how unwell that I was. So, and like I said, so that's more years ahead. My drinking is always getting more and more out of hand.
And then at one point, I started to meet with you individually. And I think that this is an important piece. You touched on the idea of healing some of the hurts that you were carrying. Is there anything in particular about that process that you can remember where, again, we see the evidence of God, the evidence of Jesus, beginning to restore Karinne's life?
I would say that throughout the healing, I think in general, I just kind of had more of like a lightness, more of a, just an overall peace. I don't really want to go into details of certain things that I was healed from, but I know that there was some major differences in my life that I could see that, okay, obviously I'm healed from that because I'm not having the same reaction. I didn't react to certain things the same way because I had went through the process of inner healing, and I truly was healed inside. So I think that when that trigger is no longer a trigger, you're not going to react.
Right.
You know?
And it's important for people to realize that inner healing doesn't mean that you forget your story or that you forget your past, but it takes you to a place where you can recognize it, you can acknowledge it, and you can be thankful for the good that has come from it. But for Karinne, there was a process of forgiveness that was a real feature in terms of her continuing to be able to move forward with God. And so, Karinne, after girls group, you began getting more involved in attending church regularly with your son.
Right. Somewhat regularly. Like I was often still too sick on a lot of Sundays from hangovers, but I went as often as I could. It wasn't until 2014 when I really was able to make it more regularly. But yes.
Yes. And so at this time, where was your relationship with Kenny?
So in 2010, Kenny and I were engaged. So we were engaged to be married. And he would go to church with me, but it was more so just to please me. He didn't have any relationship with the Lord himself. And then you guys did the premarital counseling in 2012 for Kenny and I. Chris actually was the minister for our wedding, so he married us. So we had the honor of that, and they both did the marital counseling with us. And I think that kind of really opened Kenny's eyes a lot too. So.
And so at what point did you end up getting baptized? I know because I attended the baptism. And so where was that in this timeline?
That was 1 year before I got married.
Okay.
1 year before I got married. My son and I were baptized together.
And that was a real step into committing your life seriously to these changes that you were seeking and the relationship that you wanted to have with God.
Yeah.
And so you married Kenny, and and I remember the beautiful ceremony, and I remember your son standing between the two of you, so happy and so thankful.
He is.
And he's amazing. He's an amazing young man now.
Thank you.
And so what was it that happened that caused a shift in your drinking to occur?
So when I finally quit drinking, that was March of 2014. And the highlight of the story, because as we already explained, going to AA, praying every morning to quit drinking, and what a struggle it was. And I couldn't do it on my own, even though I was trying. In March of over 7 years ago now, I was over here at Chris and Regina's house, and as we were leaving, they like to pray over us before we leave, safe travels, and that's what they do every time. And so it was just like any other ordinary night, and they began to pray for us, and they stopped and they kind of said something to each other and looked at me, and they let me know that they were picking up on a spirit of addiction. And they asked if, I would like for them to, cast it out. And at that point, I had no idea what that even meant, really. I wasn't really ever thinking about the possibility of me having a spirit of anything because I was a Christian. And all I knew was that these two people right here, they're intelligent and they're trustworthy, and they never said anything so out there or ridiculous to me. So, I definitely trust them. So I said, yes, go ahead, And so they begun into a deliverance. And, I will remember that for as long as I live, because I did not know what was going on. I just remember as Regina's looking me in the eyes, speaking to someone else, I started manifesting coughing quite uncontrollably I didn't have a cough, so that already I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on, But I knew that something was happening because I could feel it in my body. And when it was over, and we went home, and I thought that was strange. I had never been around anything like that before, but whatever, it didn't hurt me. It was just a little weird. And it wasn't until 3 days later that I realized, like, oh my gosh, I haven't drank for 3 days, and I have not even thought about alcohol for 3 days. That was a huge because I was so mentally obsessed. It was like a mental obsession, whether I'm drinking or how to not drink. But it was always there in the front of my mind. My whole world felt like it revolved around. I had to try so hard just not to drink. And then all of a sudden 3 days go by with no alcohol, not even a thought of it. So I told my husband, like, and he said, oh, I wonder if whatever they did worked. And I said, I don't know. We'll see, you know. Oh, and yes, it did, because here we are a little over 7 years later, and I haven't had a sip of alcohol. I have not wanted a sip of alcohol. I actually can be around people who are drinking wine, and I don't have any temptation at all. So God really just completely removed that addiction for me, that desire. That it was more of a mental obsession. It wasn't a physical addiction. It was a mental obsession that I had, and I had no idea. And it made sense because all of my efforts for all those years in AA, and I couldn't get it. But Regina had guided me through the process of inner healing. And I think that's the key. So I had already gotten all that healing. There was a spiritual component that needed to be removed. And once it was removed, my life has been completely transformed.
Yes, it has.
Yes.
Yes, it has.
Ever since that day, everything's been very different.
Yes, and that goes into a whole area that, we can teach on and talk on another time, that there is misinformation about the role of deliverance in the life of a Christian. And what people forget is that there's this whole other existence for a lot of people pre-Jesus. So before they came to Christ, they may have been involved in things that opened a door and exposed them to obsessions and spiritual oppression that continues to be a problem, even though they've accepted Christ, even though they are going to church, even though in Karinne's case, she and Kenny had been married and that she had been baptized. And so that's an entire area of healing, the healing ministry of Jesus, that unfortunately is being neglected at times, but has created just a tremendous freedom for Karinne in terms of her life and her future. And so after the deliverance came a surprise gift from God. Now, your son was how old at this time?
My son was 12, and just maybe a month after the deliverance, I found out that I was pregnant, and my husband and I were not planning on having any more kids because we have an almost teenager, that we were content. So I said, oh, okay, and I hoped and prayed that it was a girl, and we got our girl. So, but it wasn't easy. I think the enemy was really probably angry that I had came to the point of freedom. He didn't like that. I also became way more interested in God because I experienced his power in my life and the freedom. I was just like on cloud nine, so I was like really into it. And so that really, the enemy was not happy. So I think he was always working to steal my joy. So I had, in the beginning of my pregnancy, gosh, do you remember how far long it was? 8 weeks?
I don't.
I think it was
recall
8. It was
exactly
8 weeks when I was 8 weeks pregnant, and I went to my first appointment to do the sonogram. They had told me that I miscarried, and she was trying to pressure me to do a DNC, which is a procedure that cleans out the uterus. And I felt in my spirit that it was wrong. I was devastated, of course, but I felt that it wasn't true. And she even showed me, and she said, see, there's nothing there but an empty yolk sac. And I just remember calling Regina, and we cried and we prayed and everything. And 1 week later, I went back for a second opinion somewhere else, and the technician was like, I don't know how they missed it. There she is, taking up almost the whole thing. So that was one little tactic that he used.
Yes, and I remember that back at that time when Karinne was telling me the story of what the doctor had said, I just had a gift of faith. And Chris and I prayed for Karinne and Kenny. I had a gift of faith that this baby was there, that she was meant to be, that this was God, and it was a blessing for her and Kenny, and that she was going to be just fine. Mm-hmm. And so now you're a new mom again.
Yeah.
And so what were some of the challenges in adjusting to life with now a baby?
I mean, everything changes from over 12, 13 years. So the ways I thought that you do things like, oh, lay her on the stomach. No, it's on the side. Or, everything was just different. I had to kind of relearn how to be a mom all over again. But this time I was completely sober. My husband was sober and there, and he's an amazing father. He was there for the whole pregnancy and delivery, and it was like night and day, completely different situation. So yeah, there was challenge. It's always challenging when you have a new baby and a lack of sleep, but it was so much easier than before. Having the Lord to draw strength from, and being sober. Those are two big advantages that I had this time.
So after the birth of your daughter, God had another surprise for the two of you, and he was calling you to ministry. And so in 2014, you started to attend trainings that Chris and I presented. But you also had a wonderful encounter with a man from Africa who gave you a prophetic word.
Yeah. Yes, I did. So that was that in 2014?
I think so.
So I had gone randomly. I met someone, a wonderful young man who invited me and my husband and sister and her husband to a church event that I did not really want to go to. But I went anyways, and this was at some little church that I've never been to. There was probably only 30 people there, and this man had flown in from Uganda, Africa, and he had a very strong prophetic gifting. And I remember he had like a sermon plan, but he said, he just tore it up and threw it. He said, the Holy Spirit wants to take over tonight, so this we're not going to do. And so then he started calling on people. Whoever God was giving him a word for, he would give them the word, and they were so accurate and powerful. And I was like, oh, please, Lord. I was praying for him to give a word to the guy who I came with, because he had just gotten released from a life sentence in prison. And I felt like he needed that encouragement and the edification and all of that. So I was praying for him to receive a word. And if there's time, me too, and I, by the end of the night, it's like my sister, her husband, and the guy we went with, all of them were called out on, but not me. And, I started thinking, like, this is kind of how it goes. Like, I never really receive, any words from the Lord or anything like that. It's always kind of, and I'm like, whatever. But then I started feeling really kind of down about it. And kind of in my mind, like, how come, I was asking for this. Like, why couldn't you have just given me this? Or I was kind of being a little bratty, I'm not going to lie. I was being bratty about it, kind of pouting, leaving. And I'm by the exit. The whole service was over. The guy goes back, grabs the microphone, and says, hey, you, over there by the door. The one who's saying, oh, how come you always forget about me? I was like, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. And he called me back over, and he starts laughing, and he says, he loves you so much, he didn't forget about you, come here, And so he just starts speaking over me about like a bloodline curse that I had, a self-sabotaging curse, and breaking that off, and so many wonderful things that nobody would have known if they didn't know me, And then he also told me that I was called to the nations. And that I'm going to fly high with eagles, and that I'm going to spend my life loving God's people and loving what I do. And I'm going to be spending my life serving the Lord and traveling the world. So that was really exciting for me. I had another person tell me that shortly after too. And I believe it. I believe it. Even though it's like, it's not comfortable sharing your testimony, but it's something that's important to do. And there's power in testimony, you know, because any of you that's watching, if you struggled through identity problems or any sort of addiction or maybe abandonment or, you know, being adopted or any type of being lost, there's hope. You know, you could hear my story and see I'm nobody special. You know, I'm just like everyone else, but he came through in a powerful way. It's about allowing him. And, you know, we got to take the steps and we have to surrender some things, not everything all at once, you know, but if we seek him, he's there. So.
And that's right. That's exactly right. And so from that point, Chris and I and CRS Ministries conducted a boot camp. And that was in 2016. And we concluded that boot camp by taking everyone up to Azusa Now, that was at the LA Coliseum. And I forget if it was, but approximately 110,000 Christians had joined together in the LA Coliseum with special guests and phenomenal worship. And so we were there and we were part of that. And so what are some of your experiences and your memories of that time at Azusa Now?
Just the presence of God. That was, from what I remember, the very most. I mean, there's a lot of memorable things, you know, from it raining and, you know, just the whole Coliseum worshiping together. It literally felt like heaven on earth. You know, I could just feel the presence so thick, you know, and powerful. And then at one point later in the afternoon, we have the Bethel ministry that was there to, you know, kind of pray over people, minister to people. And then Regina starts praying over one of the ministry team, and then they're all lining up coming to get prayer from her and Chris. And then it just kind of went like wildfire from there. You know, I remember people kind of going out in joy and just laughter. And then it was this whole section beautiful. Just laughing uncontrollably, just filled with the joy of the Spirit. And I had never experienced anything like that, you know. I've seen other people having that, but I never felt it myself. And just being in it, it was just really powerful. And it was nice to see my spiritual parents, you know, ministering to those who were ministers, you know, and they were doing deliverances and prayer, and just, it was very anointed.
Yes,
it was very memorable.
It was an amazing time, and it was so fun to have Karinne and Kenny and many others who were there with us to just experience this incredible gathering and then to witness and participate, because Karinne and Kenny were with us and were ministering to the people who were in this section as the power of God fell and began to break out and powerfully impact the people that were there. And so also we did in 2017 crew training. You and Kenny were both a very important part of that. And so to give a little bit of an idea about what crew training was about, this was a group of people who were called to ministry in terms of what Chris and I had witnessed in their lives and how the Spirit of God had moved for each of them. And so what we did is we step by step took them through the process of being able to minister to people, instructing them in how to lead people to salvation, how to share your faith, how to baptize someone, so that they would have a tool belt basically of ministry, so that when the heart of Jesus moved in them to be able to minister and share their faith with someone else, that they would feel confident in being able to do that. And so what was a memorable time for you in crew training?
Okay, so for the crew training, what stands out to me the most is the amount of healing that we got just through the training, and the education and seeing things firsthand in a very private, in their home, in a private setting, a safe setting, and being able to learn about like deliverance and healing and all of those aspects of ministry in a safe place. That's what stands out to me the most. And of course, I had another deliverance during that time too, which once again I thought, okay, now I've been in ministry for a while, like I'm good, and my life was great. It was. So I didn't think that I would need another deliverance, but sure enough, I got one, and even more freedom after that. And that second deliverance had to do with when I was a teenager doing occultic activities. I still had stuff attached to me. So I got a lot of freedom from that too, and it helped me to understand that just because someone's walking with the Lord and involved in ministry doesn't mean that they don't have something affecting them. So more evidence of that.
And so as Chris and I were instructing the crew on various aspects of the ministry of Jesus, it was really helpful, really instrumental for them to actually see it live and demonstrated. And so what I tell people is that you can talk, you can read, you can teach from the Word, and again, say, for example, about swimming. And so you can have a person on the side of the pool and you can talk to them about what it's going to look like and what it's going to feel like and how it's going to go and what they need to do. But the person doesn't know how to swim until they actually get into the pool. And so crew training was an opportunity for all of them to see that this wasn't just Chris and Regina. This is something that God has made available for all believers. And so they got to see the power of God released through their prayers over people. They got to see that they could minister in healing and deliverance for others as well. And so that was a valuable piece. And now from there, you and Kenny were part of a team that actually moved with us and CRS Ministries into public ministry. We started out at one venue where we were meeting every other week, I believe, and then in 2019, we started a weekly meeting. And so do you have any memories of times of ministry that stand out to you that were your prayers over people and what you saw the Spirit of God do in response to that?
I think that during that time, God was really kind of bringing all of us crew members to a place where we had to trust that we have gifts too. So that's we have our elders that are very gifted and anointed, so we're always like, oh, go to Regina, go to Chris, but the Lord was showing us that no, we're capable, and we're just messengers of the Lord, we're just conduits, and that we are all anointed in different ways, and we come together as a body, the full body of Christ, and we all have a purpose. So during that time, I remember numerous occasions where I'm praying over someone and I'm getting either a word or I could see it or hear it or think it, and I'm a little hesitant to say anything because I'm afraid of being wrong and looking like a fool. So I don't say anything, and I kept doing that. And Regina, I told her about it, and she encouraged me to just, if you're wrong, you're wrong. Who cares? You don't know until, you got to at least ask. So then I started doing that, and I found out, oh my gosh, spot on. I would be spot on. And the reason why the Lord does that is because, I remember praying for a man, and I'm thinking I'm praying for him, but I kept getting his sister. And I asked about his sister who has cancer, and she's the one who needed prayers. Or, just different, someone I get right knee. There's something wrong with right, oh yes, and it's been killing me and I've been praying about it, or just different things like that. And I got to watch, praying for people with certain issues that seem impossible that this is really going to get answered. But then I have to switch my mentality, like, okay, our Father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Like, he has all the endless resources. Just ask. We're allowed to ask. And praying for a specific thing, and then they come back the next week like, guess what, I got it, or this got healed, or so we see a lot of healings and miracles on a very casual basis, so it's like, okay, God is good, and he's very involved, and he wants us to be doing this, because he shows up and he answers prayers all the time. So that was very encouraging to have so many prayers be answered, and so quickly too.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And absolutely. And so now tell us a bit about your life now. Where is it that you're living, and how has that changed?
I don't live in a little apartment in the alley anymore. I live in a quite nice big house in a cul-de-sac in a safe neighborhood. Everything that I wanted in a home that I used to think about, like, oh, I want a yard and a garden and a fireplace and, my own bedroom, stuff like that. Simple things. I have all of that now. The Lord has blessed us in every way. I feel like he's blessed us, blessed our finances, blessed our health, blessed our relationship, our marriage, our children. Life is not 100% perfect all the time. We have, things happen and annoyances, but overall it's been really good. So, and I work for myself now, and I get to work from home, so I get to be there for my daughter all the time, and it's just been good. It's been really good.
And that's so wonderful because, again, with your daughter, the world that she's being raised in and how it differs from what you went through at 20.
Right. Yeah. And my daughter is so knows the Lord, and she's a confident little girl. Oh my gosh, she's so confident, and I think she's really gifted as well. And she talks to people about God. She'll go lay hands on you and pray for you, and she likes to worship dance and all types of stuff. So I have no doubt in my mind that she's going to be doing ministry work when she, is older. So, yeah. And
so, too, what about your son?
Oh, my son's great. My son is amazing. So he's almost 19. He's in college, and he likes to surf, and he likes to go to the gym, and he loves baseball. And so he's very healthy. He has never drank, never done drugs, never smoked a cigarette, never been in trouble at school or at home. So that's huge because, he came from Kenny and I, who were the opposite, growing up. And but he's been protected and blessed, and he knows the Lord, and he's very grateful. He tells me from time to time, thank you. Thank you for... I'm so glad that you don't drink anymore, and I'm glad that Carly doesn't have to deal with what I went through.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful kids.
Yes, they are.
They're just amazing. And so also, again, evidence of the gifts that God has given you. You are a hairstylist, and your clients refer to you as a hairapist. And so what is it that you talk about with some of the people who come to your shop to get your wonderful hair creations?
Oh gosh, anything and everything, anything they want to talk about. One of my clients, she's a very talented young lady, and she made me this really cute sign that says, the hairapist is in, and I have it up by the window. And so everyone notices that, and so they start calling me a hairapist also. And it's a known thing that people feel comfortable with their therapist, or hairapist, they're hairstylists, because we're separate.
Right.
They could tell us things they don't feel comfortable telling a therapist because, well, we're not going to call CPS or this or that, or, there's different, reasons why they feel more comfortable. And people open up. I have people who've come to the Lord from getting their hair done and me ministering to them. And a lot of people who've gotten sober just by seeing the transformation in me, and that I can live happy and fulfilled without alcohol. I have fun. I have more fun now than I did back then. That's a fact. So I think just the positive influence helps a lot of people. And I do have plenty of atheists and agnostics that that come to me to get their hair done, and I know I find it like it's my mission to like prove to them that God is real. And I say, well, what do you think about this? I'll tell them about my deliverance, and I don't drink now. They're like, interesting, but I don't know. But I've had people who are not believers want me to pray for them.
Yes.
And I've been having that a lot more lately, and they start crying, and they're, like they feel something, and then when I'm done, they're in tears, and they're like, I've never felt so much peace.
Right.
And I said, okay, so, you see, he's real.
He is
real. The Lord
real.
Is real.
He is real.
Can't see him, but you could feel him.
Yes.
And if these were just words in vain and there was nothing to it, you're not going to be crying in front of me.
Right. Right.
Shaking. So it's been good, and I know that everyone who comes to the shop is for a reason, and yeah.
Absolutely. So you literally have divine appointments.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of who comes to see you.
Yes.
And they think they're there for hair, but lots of times they find out that they're there for so much more. And so in conclusion, Karinne, would you give us just a little bit more on the life that you enjoy now and how it's completely been transformed by the heart of God and the love of Jesus?
Yeah, my husband and I, that's a big deal, because I had mentioned in part one, plenty of infidelity, and so there's no longer the lack of trust. He's a godly man. I completely trust him. He's a leader. He's a completely transformed life as well. And we're very happy together. We get to do ministry together. He loves the Lord. We pray together. They say a couple that prays together stays together. We love each other. I was able to fall in love with him again, even though I had fallen out at a younger age. And we're just happy. We're happy and strong. We're stronger together.
Yes.
We balance each other out quite well. And it's just good. It's just been all around blessed, and I think it's a really good example for kids to see us, like that we were hating each other for a while, and now we're happy and in love and healthy,
Yes.
So
yes,
yeah.
And so it really is a miracle that these two managed to go from the life of alcohol and addiction and infidelities to being a truly happily married couple that love God, that love each other, that love their children.
Yeah.
And so the four of them are an absolute example and a testimony to the goodness, the mercies, the love of God for each of us. And so was there anything else you wanted to add, Karinne?
I would say if you feel like you're too far gone or that you're not able to be helped, that's not true. It's God loves you, and he has a plan for you, and you gotta just take it one day at a time, maybe 1 hour at a time, and to not fear what you have to give up, because God created us. He knows the desires of our heart, and he sees things from the bigger picture. So he's never going to take you away from one lifestyle to give you a downgrade. It's always going to be an upgrade.
It's always an upgrade.
So there's just so much more freedom, peace, joy, happiness, and a more fulfilling life that's on the other side. You just have to take the chance and trust him with your life.
And so thank you so much, sweetheart. I just so appreciate your willingness to say yes to what the Lord has asked of you and to share your story so that so many others can know that there is hope. Yes. And that there is freedom and that there is true love and happiness.
That's right.
That's available in Jesus.
Thank you for always being there for me.
Yes.
And guiding me and teaching me and just being a wonderful counselor and mentor and spiritual mother.
Thank you.
And I appreciate, and you too, Chris, I appreciate you guys so much.
And we love you too.
Thank you. Love you guys.